The village in it with a map and a plan. No place too tiny for this determined man. Crossing the counties one by one, you'll see in every English corner a bit of history.
Welcome back to Harborough again, everybody. Now, here's another very small place, but this has got a big history. It's also got a couple of massive buildings as well. Now, do you remember a couple of days ago when we were in Bringhurst and we were in the cemetery at the very end of that video? I could see the biggest building in this place from that cemetery because this is on a hilltop. You can see it for miles and miles around if you know where to look. This is the beautiful little village of NEVILL HOLT. NEVILL HOLT, Thomas Neville's Wood. Now here's an unusual place if ever there was one. We're used to seeing villages on this channel, it's what we do after all. NEVILL HOLT is a village, but definitely unlike the vast majority. Come to this place and you'll find a magnificent church. That's normal. What's not normal is what's around it. NEVILL HOLT's history spans centuries, from its origins with the Palmer family in the 1400s to the influential Neville family, who gave their name to not just the village, but to the massive house right in the middle of it. That house is called NEVILL HOLT Hall. The Nevilles were notable recusants during the 16th and 17th centuries, enduring political upheaval and heavy fines. Among their number was Anne Neville, born at the house in 1605. Anne would become the abbess of Pontoise near Paris. The estate was later owned by the Cunard family. The Cunards were wealthy shipping magnates connected to Canada. The hall would later become a prep school, and it stayed that way for several decades of the 20th century before it was forced to close thanks to a scandal that saw dire consequences for two of its teachers. It closed as a school in 1998, but 2 years later, David Ross stepped in. He transformed it into a venue for the arts, including a custom-built opera theatre. Now, every year, the Opera House hosts something called the NEVILL HOLT Opera Festival, which attracts people from far and wide. The hall, the Opera House and the church form the core of the village here. There are other houses, but none of them can hold a candle to those buildings. Let's check them out. This is NEVILL HOLT as it was in 1900. One look at this old map and straight away you have a pretty accurate picture of the place. NEVILL HOLT is a prestigious estate centred on a massive hall. Since 1900, there have been very few changes to this layout. NEVILL HOLT was first recorded as Holt, meaning a wood. Neville would come later. Originally known as Holt Hall, the mansion in the middle of this dates from the 14th century, incorporating many styles of architecture from medieval times onwards. The main alterations here have been with the hall itself and not its surroundings. Essentially, the hall, the church and the buildings associated with them both are still as they were, save for the stable block, which has seen a raft of changes as the hall's use has altered itself. NEVILL HOLT as a village can be defined as this. The centre of the place is all based around a clutch of buildings that are contiguous with NEVILL HOLT Hall. These include the Church of St Mary and an opera house. The latter of those isn't marked on this map because it's within the old stable block. Let's have a look at the church to start with. Dedicated to St Mary, this dates largely from the 13th century, but it has had many later perpendicular features added. It was restored in 1865 to designs by the architects Goddard and Son, and then it was restored again in 1878. St Mary's is unlike most other churches. We can admire its Victorian architecture from the outside with no problem, but we can't get inside this one. You see, this is a closed church because it's currently in private ownership. As such, the church, churchyard and the burials associated with them are protected by a Ministry of Justice dispensing order issued under Section 78 of the Church of England's Mission and Pastoral Measure in 2011. So, with not much more that we can really do with this church, our attention shifts to the hall this is associated with. Neville Holt Hall sits on a small hilltop at the centre of the village. It's a Grade 1 listed building originally constructed before 1300. And you can tell this is a private church as well because there's no entrance from the road. It's surrounded by a wall, this churchyard, on all sides. So yeah, it's not the kind of church we can actually have a look at. And the same kind of goes for the hall as well, because it's surrounded by high walls and things like that. So this might be interesting to try and film. You can see parts of the hall if you know where to stand, and luckily I do. Exactly when is open to debate, but experts think it might have been as early as the 12th century when the local woodland, or the holt, was cleared. Nobody has ever managed to ascertain if there are any 12th century remains here. The oldest known parts of this building go back to the middle of the 1400s. For example, the stone porch and the oriel window were built in 1474. In the early years, the estate was in the possession of the Kirby or Kirkby family. By 1444, Thomas Palmer had acquired the property and built up a large estate, having purchased lands in Holt, Medbourne, Drayton and other villages close by. He laid out a large park, most likely for hunting purposes, and made additions to the hall. One of those was to include a church, although it's not clear whether or not that building was related in any way to St Mary's, seeing as that predates Palmer's time. In any event, in 1457, his eldest daughter Catherine married William Neville from a family at Rolleston in Nottinghamshire. William Neville seems to have been unrelated to Robert de Neville, the lord of the manor in the 1120s. If the two were connected, it must have been very distantly. In any event, William was the first in a line of Nevilles spanning almost 400 years. Yes, I told you, I said I knew where to stand, and it's very easy to do this actually. There's a public footpath that runs all the way around the hall. If you basically turn left at the stable block, which is that over there, the footpath then loops around this very deep ha-ha, and you get this magnificent view of Neville Holt Hall. I tell you what, the people that live there right now, they must have a very good view themselves, because this is on top of a hill, as I said at the beginning of this episode, and this is the view into the valley below. You can see for miles here, and it's a really nice day today too, so on a day like this, the view is spectacular. Fabulous, isn't it? William and Catherine Neville were followed at Holt by their son Thomas. His parents died when he was a minor, so he was raised by another family. He's believed to have fought for King Henry VIII in his Scottish campaigns and was knighted as a result. Arise, Sir Thomas. He became an important landowner in Leicestershire and fulfilled several duties such as Justice of the Peace and High Sheriff of the county. He purchased further lands in the area and carried out extensive additions to the hall. Sir Thomas had a daughter, Mary, but also an illegitimate son, Humphrey Blunt, to whom he left the estate on his death. Little is known about Humphrey, but he used the surname Neville. He died in 1590 and the estate passed to Mary. Mary Neville married Thomas Smythe, who agreed to change his surname to Neville, and on the death of Humphrey, the property passed to their son, Sir Thomas Neville Jr. It's believed that one of these Thomases gave their surname Neville to Holt, transforming it into the modern name. Many notable historical figures have lived in or have been born in this building since then. The one that sticks out straight away is the French abbess Anne Neville, born here in 1605. Her parents were Lady Mary Sackville and Sir Henry Neville, the son of Sir Thomas Jr. Henry was a renowned soldier on the Royalist side in the English Civil War. Taken prisoner at the Battle of Naseby, he was imprisoned for 6 months and the estate was confiscated by Parliament. Henry was forced to pay a fine of £6,000 to recover the property. The Nevilles would eventually disappear from the local scene, but not before they'd firmly established the name of the hall and that of the village. No longer simply Holt, the prefix Neville was here to stay, despite what's become of the building since they left. So as you've probably gathered, I have moved away from where I was standing because there's only so many shots you can take of the hall from that vantage point before it gets a little bit boring. And there's more to see here in Neville Holt. So I haven't finished talking about the hall and its history, but as I finish that off, I'll give you sort of a flavour of what else is here in Neville Holt, because to be honest with you, there's more than just the hall and the church, to be honest. There's a lot of good scenery. In the late 19th century, the hall and its estate was owned by the Cunard family, who made their vast fortune from shipping. In 1896, the hall was the birthplace of the writer, anti-racism and anti-fascism activist, publisher and society hostess Nancy Cunard. In 1919, the hall was bought by the Reverend C.A.C. Bolker and became a preparatory school. That was run by the Phillips family from 1928 onwards and acted as an IAPS boarding school. IAPS standing for Independent Association of Prep Schools. It stayed that way until 1998 and could still have been a school today if the details of a child sexual abuse scandal at it had never come to light. That saw one teacher convicted and another commit suicide shortly after police arrived with an arrest warrant. It was the hall's darkest time. 2 years later, the hall was bought and restored by David Ross, the man who co-founded the successful telecoms company, the Carphone Warehouse. Ross had visited the hall when it was a prep school because a friend of his at Uppingham School had once attended it. Ross made several changes to the hall, but he didn't stop at the main building. These days, Neville Holt Hall has other structures around it, which make it stand out from other country houses. The largest and most unusual of these is a theatre. On maps, it's referred to as the Opera House. Okay, so what we've done, we've walked all the way around the hall and halfway around it again to get back to this point here in front of the church. But I've done that purposely because there's one thing we haven't yet spoken about, and that would be the building you can see behind me there with the clock on it. That is the old stable block, and these days it's also an opera house. And this is the Opera House. Built by Ross as a 350-seat theatre, this is located within what used to be the hall's 17th century former stable yard. Remember, the hall used to be a school, so the stable yard area is no stranger to seeing unusual things. Before this existed, there was a science lab here. That's not all. It's also seen things like classrooms, a carpentry workshop, an indoor swimming pool, and, get this, even a boxing ring. The Opera House easily trumps all of those, though. It's since been extended to a capacity of 400 from its original 350, thanks to the architect's Witherford Watson Mann, opening anew in 2018. Now, in the summer, the Opera House is well used. It becomes the centre of the estate when it hosts the annual Neville Holt Opera Festival. The 2021 festival was held in the open air due to COVID-19 restrictions. The two operas performed that year were La Traviata and Don Giovanni. The Opera House won the 2019 Reba National Award and made the shortlist for the 2019 Sterling Prize for Excellence in Architecture. The festival is about more than just opera. It's about the broader spectrum of arts and culture, and it's held here every June. Visitors can enjoy outstanding pieces of British sculpture in the gardens, including works by Anthony Gormley, Rachel Whiteread, Alan Jones and Mark Quinn. With panoramic views that look out over 3 counties, Neville Holt's Opera Theatre is surrounded by bucolic private gardens designed by Chelsea Gold Medal winner Rupert Golby. It's all set against the stunning backdrop that is Neville Holt Hall. Let's throw in a piece on Nancy Cunard while we're here. Born in the hall in 1896, Nancy Cunard was a writer, heiress and political activist. Born into the British upper class, most of her life was dedicated to fighting racism and fascism. Her works made her one of the 20th century's most distinguished writers and artists, acting as a muse for such people as Aldous Huxley, Ernest Hemingway, James Joyce, Man Ray and William Carlos Williams. Nancy's father was Sir H. Cunard, an heir to the Cunard Line shipping businesses. He was interested in polo and fox hunting, so you can see why the Hall would have been right up his street. Her mother was Maud Alice Burke, an American who often went by the name Emerald. Nancy was brought up on the estate at Neville Holt until 1911, when her parents separated before moving to London with her mother. Her education was at various boarding schools, including time in France and Germany. It was a move to Paris in 1920 that kick-started her career as a writer. The French capital offered her copious amounts of modernism, surrealism and Dada. Much of her published poetry dates from this period. A brief relationship with Aldous Huxley influenced several of his novels. Indeed, Nancy was the model for Myra Viviash in Antic Hay in 1923 and for Lucy Tandermount in Point Counterpoint in 1928, the same year her publishing company, Hours Press, was founded. Cunard then began a relationship with Henry Crowder, an African-American jazz musician who was working in Paris. This led her to become an activist in matters concerning racial politics and civil rights in the US. In 1931, Hours Press published the pamphlet Black Man and White Ladyship, which was an attack on racist attitudes. In the mid-1930s, Cunard took an anti-fascist fight, writing about Mussolini's annexation of Ethiopia and the Spanish Civil War. It was in these texts where her prediction of another world war were written, referring to the events in Spain. Her stories about the suffering of Spanish refugees became the basis for a fundraising appeal in the Manchester Guardian. 1937 saw the publication of a series of pamphlets of war poetry, including the work of W. H. Auden, Tristan Tzara and Pablo Neruda. During World War II, Cunard worked to the point of physical exhaustion as a translator in London on behalf of the French resistance. Post-war, Cunard would rent a small house in the French village of La Mothe-Fenelon in the Dordogne Valley. By this time, her mental health was in serious decline and her physical health wasn't much better, worsened by alcoholism, poverty and self-destructive behaviour. This led to severe weight loss. Indeed, at the time of her death, Cunard was a mere 60 pounds. Her body was returned to England for cremation and then sent back to Paris. Her ashes rest in urn number 9016 at a cemetery in the capital. Now, you can walk around the rest of this estate by using public footpaths, therefore forming a loop around the hall. Having done that myself, there's one more thing I want to cover on foot, these marvellous gates. These form the main entrance to the hall, but they're a little more than just that. These are memorial gates. Together with the screen connected to them, they were built in 1950 of wrought iron with stone ashlar end piers and low walls. They have 2 panels on them, which record the names of the 30 old boys of Neville Holt Preparatory School who died in World War II. To make our exit from the village, we're driving down the tree-lined avenue that leads to another set of iron gates on the western side of the hall. These are much older, dating from 1880. If the memorial gates are the entrance to the hall, you can think of these as the entrance to the entire estate. In fact, that's probably what they were designed to be. Right next to them, there's a gate lodge. The tree-lined avenue would originally have been a coach drive leading up to the hall. These days it's a public road and it'll take us to our next village. But hang on, there's something else to cover. To the north of the parish it's mainly farmland, and there are several farms up there. Here's one that everybody should know about. It's called Priory Farm because it sits on the remains of one. It was called Bradley Priory. We can't get to its site because it's private land, but we can talk about it a little. Bradley Priory was founded between 1220 and 1234. The first mention of it in any sort of record came in 1233, when Robert Bundy, alternatively known as Robert de Burnaby, was listed as its patron. It's thought that Robert might have been the founder of the priory. It was only very small, and as such it wasn't always granted its own prior. For example, it's known that John Penny served as both prior of Bradley when he was the abbot of Leicester Abbey. In 1535 there were only 2 canons here, and only a single child at the almonry. Bradley is known to have owned a windmill at Holt since it was founded, and gained the manor of Blaston in 1385. In the Valla Ecclesiasticus of 1535, the priory is recorded as owning land in Blaston, Slawston, Holt and Hollyoake, and had a total income of just £20. It was dissolved in 1536 and its site was granted to Humphrey Neville. The site today is occupied by Priory Farm and nothing remains of the buildings. That said, there are a minor collection of earthworks that show the former precinct boundaries. So that's Neville Holt, a very historic little place which takes you all the way back to the medieval period. It's so interesting to see what it's become now. To end this week, we're off to another big village. Get ready for what is allegedly the most desirable place to live in all of Leicestershire. Now, just before I go, remember, this video is part of a huge project to visit every civil parish in England. That's more than 10,000. These routes are pre-planned, and due to time constraints, I can't cover every detail or walk down every street. Please don't complain if this video missed something out. I pronounce names how I choose to. I am very aware that local dialect may vary, and I don't take kindly to criticism about this. You've been warned. It's impossible to know everything too. If this video was terrible, make your own. If you're a regular watcher of The Village Idiot, you're not the only one. If you've got a small business, why not use my videos to advertise it? Leave a comment below if you're interested. And finally, thanks for watching this episode, everybody. Give us a like and a subscribe if you've enjoyed this episode, and share it with your friends and relatives. It all helps to keep this mission going. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as The Village Idiot, and I'm out.